Plenty of winners and losers from SEC Week 7, but who impressed most? Texas, LSU, Vanderbilt? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONCollege, get $20 off your first purchase. All right, we'll get to our losers of the week in the SEC, but we got to start with our winners first and foremost. And right off the bat, starting with a winner, how about Tre Wisner from the University of Texas? Texas threw an interception and then punted on their first few offensive drives with running back Jaden Blue not doing much. And then the Longhorns started feeding number 2 running back, Tre Wisner, who took they took a 14-3 lead, and then Wisner broke off another touchdown run, a 43-yard touchdown run to make it 21-3 Texas just before halftime. Really gave them that shot in the arm that they needed. And Wisner finished the day 13 carries, 118 yards, and a touchdown. He had 4 catches as well. He averaged over 9 yards a carry, and the Longhorns crushed Oklahoma in the annual rivalry game 34-3. Things were interesting as Texas held just a 7-3 lead with about 4:19 to go in the first half. And that's when Texas pulled off those quick 2 touchdown drives to open this one up. Now, Quinn Ewers didn't have to do much in this one. He threw for just 199 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. And Wisner is now the leading rusher for the Longhorns, yardage-wise. He jumped ahead of Jaden Blue and Jarrett Gibson this weekend. And the number 1 Longhorns, the last undefeated SEC team. And look, the question is, they're 6-0. What's their best wins of the season? Well, they did beat Michigan up in the Big House, but Michigan's now 4-2. And their win over Oklahoma, who was ranked this past weekend, is now unranked. Will Oklahoma be ranked again later this year? We'll see. But the Horns, their toughest tests remain ahead, and they will have road trips to Vandy, Arkansas, and Texas A&M. Remember, we said before the season, they got the luck of the draw. Oklahoma got the tougher part of the SEC schedule than Oklahoma did. But look, Vandy's turned into a tough road game now. Arkansas's turned into a rough road game, and I've been saying it all offseason. That A&M game, they're going to treat it like it's their Super Bowl. But perhaps their toughest test is up next. It is a home game, but it is number 5 Georgia coming to town this Saturday. So we'll see how the Longhorns do. But undefeated, unscathed, a nice dominant performance, and major props to that Texas defense that played lights out on Saturday. That's how you get it done. Another impressed of the weekend. How about Garrett Nussmeier at LSU? And look, in all honesty, we should probably give this award to LSU's offensive line because they were phenomenal in terms of pass blocking. But Garrett Nussmeier, perhaps one of his most inaccurate passing days, went just 22 of 51 for 337 yards. Now, that's a 43% completion rate. But when LSU needed it most, Nussmeier led a game-tying touchdown drive in the final minutes, completing passes on 4th and 6, and then connecting with Aaron Anderson on a 23-yard touchdown pass on 4th and 5 in the final minute. Then in overtime, Nussmeier threw a perfect pass on first down to Kyron Lacey for the walk-off 25-yard touchdown pass. Nussmeier did throw 2 picks on the night, so again, was not a flawless night by any means, but when his team needed him most, Garrett Nussmeier delivered, led LSU to a 29-26 overtime win over Ole Miss. And Nussmeier, he remains in the mix as a dark horse Heisman candidate. He is 2nd in the SEC in total passing yards, 6th in the country. He leads the SEC in touchdown passes with 18th. That's with 18 touchdowns. That's 5th best in the country. But perhaps the most impressive stat, Ole Miss came into this game leading the nation in sacks with 24. They did not sack Nussmeier once. He continues to lead the SEC as the least sacked quarterback. Just does a good job avoiding pressure, gets rid of the football. Now, Nuss is tied with Quinn Ewers. They've both only been sacked 2 times on the season, but of course, Ewers has only played in 4 games, while Nuss has played in all 6. So also a little love here for LSU's defense. They racked up 6 sacks on the night against Jackson Dart. Braden Swinson had 2 sacks. Major Burns had a sack and a half. And LSU is now second in the SEC in sacks behind Ole Miss. And Swinson, second among sack leaders in the conference behind Kyle Kennard at South Carolina. So that is getting it done. Big win there for Brian Kelly and LSU. Another winner of the weekend over at Tennessee, running back Dylan Sampson. On a day where not much went right for the Tennessee offense, Dylan Sampson ran the ball for 112 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns, all coming in the second half. That included the walk-off score in overtime as the Vols beat Florida 23-17 in a very physical rivalry game. And Dylan Sampson, the SEC's leading rusher at 699 yards, leads the conference with 15 rushing touchdowns. In fact, he is second in the nation in rushing touchdowns behind Ashton Jeanty at Boise State. And Dylan Sampson, he's going to need to have a big day for the Vols as they play host to Alabama in a must-win game for Tennessee if they want to still make the playoff. That is a big one this weekend. Another winner of the weekend, man, second straight week. How about Diego Pavia at Vanderbilt? We've been talking all about him. We talked last week about Vanderbilt being a legit competitive team now under the leadership of Pavia, and yet Vegas wasn't listening as they had Vandy a 2-touchdown underdog at Kentucky. And well, Diego Pavia followed up his upset of Alabama a week ago with an upset of Kentucky on the road, beating the Cats in Lexington 20-13. Pavia threw for just 143 yards, was 15 of 18 passing, 2 touchdown passes, did have a pick, but he also rushed for 53 yards, including a 31-yarder. Also worth noting, he played hurt. Pavia telling Cole Kublik after the game, you look at Jerry Kill and what he's done for us, I will not quit on that guy. I don't care if I got a broken arm, broken anything. I do this for Jerry Kill. Real stuff. He has problems off this field way bigger than a little injury I got. That's my guy. I'm willing to die for him. So Diego Pavia, man, willing to die for Jerry Kill. What kind of monster did Vanderbilt get this offseason from New Mexico State? Danny Cannell lists Pavia on his top 5 list of Heisman candidates currently. It might be a little bit of a stretch, but if he keeps playing like this, who's more important to their team than Diego Pavia? It feels weird saying this, but Pavia, look, he just makes winning plays, and lowly Vanderbilt, they already surpassed their Vegas projected win total. They sit at 4-2 overall, 2-1 in the conference. And like I keep saying, they're really only 2 plays away from being an undefeated 6-0. They should get their 5th win of the year. They host Ball State this week before they host number 1 Texas on October 26th. Now, if Texas gets by Georgia this weekend, emotional letdown maybe the week after against Vandy. We'll see. That's going to be a fun one coming up in just 2 weeks. Also, shout out to linebacker Miles Capers. Suffered a serious head injury, was brought off the field on a stretcher on Saturday. Remember, he was just named D lineman of the week last week for Vanderbilt. So thoughts go out to him. Another impress of the weekend, Carson Beck. Look, this one's a little bit weird because he didn't play great early in this game, but it was a day where he had multiple turnovers again. Carson Beck would go 36 for 48 for 459 yards and 3 touchdowns. That 459 was a career high for Beck as Georgia beat Mississippi State 41-31. Kirby Smart saying after the game, Beck is experienced. The game gets a little tight there, and he's cool. He's not panicked. Beck is 3rd in the SEC in passing yards behind Jackson Dart and Garrett Nussmeier. He is 2nd in touchdown passes behind just Nussmeier, ahead of Dart. And a little bit worried about Georgia. Their run game, Branson Robinson ran for 12 yards and a touchdown before he left the game with a right knee injury early in the second quarter. Kirby Smart said he did not know the severity of the injury. And then, of course, running back Roderick Robinson has not played this season after having toe surgery. Losing Branson Robinson makes depth a little bit of concern behind Trevor Etienne. We'll certainly have to keep an eye on that one because we know Georgia's at their best when they are running the football effectively. Another winner of the weekend. How about Marcus Carroll? Big day for Missouri running back Marcus Carroll. Rushed for 91 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns as Mizzou won a weird road game, 45-3 at UMass. Not really much else worth mentioning in this game other than Luther Burden did leave the game with an injury. He scored a 61-yard touchdown rush early in the game, had 5 catches for 59 yards. It was reportedly a shoulder, so certainly something to keep an eye on there for one of the best wide receivers in the conference. Mizzou now 5-1. They play host to Auburn this Saturday. And a few people I threw in here for honorable mention. Look, when we talk winners of the weekend, usually includes just winners. But how about some guys who really played their butts off? In our honorable mention, I got Michael Van Buren, Mississippi State. They lost Blake Shapen for the season a couple weeks ago. I said the Dogs were clearly the worst team in the SEC, and it still might be true. But how about the true freshman from Maryland, Michael Van Buren Jr.? Jeff Lebby got the most out of him. He threw for over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns against that vaunted Georgia secondary. Bulldogs lost 41-31, but they were 33.5-point underdogs at Georgia, lost by 10. Hat tip to Van Buren. Next up, a home game against Texas A&M. Another honorable mention, Lenore Sellers. Some love for him. He was completely shut down a week ago against Ole Miss, where they only scored 3 points. Sellers got going in this one against that Alabama defense, threw for 238 yards, 2 touchdowns, had 19 rushing yards, a costly fumble late that gave Bama the lead, but Sellers really played one of his better games of his young career. And when you remember, he's only still a redshirt freshman. Some brighter days are ahead for Lenore Sellers. Came an eyelash away from beating Alabama on the road. And then the last in our honorable mention, the Florida defense. I want to give them a little love there after shutting down UCF the week prior. They held UCF to just 13 points. And this week they held Josh Heupel's high-flying offense to just 312 total yards, 17 points in regulation before they went on to lose an OT. And that Austin Armstrong-led defense, they give up 41 points to Miami, 33 to A&M. They have been much improved these past 2 weeks, albeit in a loss. And there you have it. That is our winners of the weekend. Coming up next, our not-so-winners, our losers. Who stunk up the joint? Who disappointed us? Who depressed in SEC Week 7? We got all that coming your way here in just a second on Locked On SEC. But first, I want to remind you guys, today's episode is presented to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. When you are hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. They're going to help you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Go check them out right now. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Go post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn Jobs. Holiday season is right around the corner. Get your staffing done right now. All right, roll along here, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Keep coming back and checking us out each and every day. All right, we did our winners of the weekend. Now it is time to get into our losers of the weekend, are depressed, if you will. And we got to start with the Oklahoma offense. If it wasn't already obvious, Oklahoma has an offensive problem. Sooners put up just 239 total yards of offense in their 34-3 loss to Texas. OU was just 4 of 15 on third downs in the game. Quarterback Michael Hawkins threw for 148 yards. The Sooners averaged just 2.4 yards per carry in the run game. And in 4 games of action this season, including 2 starts, Michael Hawkins has thrown for just 1 touchdown and has 1 rushing touchdown. I saw some Oklahoma fans were even calling for Jackson Arnold to take back over at quarterback. That's how poorly the offenses looked. Hawkins was the first true freshman quarterback to start for OU in this rivalry game that, remember, dates back to 1900. It's worth noting, Oklahoma, their offensive line is a mess right now. Their receiving core has been decimated by injuries. Sooners are second to last in the conference in scoring offense, just ahead of Kentucky. And they are dead last in the SEC in offensive yards. Dead last in rushing yards. Dead last in passing yards. They're the only SEC team to not have thrown for 1,000 yards yet on the season. Oklahoma has scored just 15 touchdowns on the year. You compare that to Ole Miss, who scored 36. Texas has scored 34. After the game, Brett Venables said, "It starts with me. I've got to do a better job getting these guys ready to play." Oklahoma will be home for the first time in 4 weeks as they host South Carolina next Saturday. But they got to get something figured out with that offense, man. It is bad. Another loser of the weekend. I threw Billy Bowman in here, the DB for the Oklahoma Sooners. He did have an interception in the game, but only had one tackle other than that. And his comments after the game caught headlines saying that the Longhorns did not earn their win on Saturday. Instead, he believes it was gift wrapped. Here's what Bowman said. He said, "We just gift wrapped them opportunities. We just gave it to them. As a defense, we're better than that. End of story. We gave it to them. They didn't earn what they got shortly after that interception." Now, look, the Sooners did make a ton of mistakes. They fumbled twice, but they were dominated about every phase of the game. Cameras even caught Bowman entering the stadium pregame saying, "They not ready. They not ready." And he was walking behind his teammate, Danny Stutzman, who sported a gold chain of upside-down horns. Yeah, this is one where Billy Bowman, you just kind of own it and say, "We play terrible and we deserve to lose." You don't say, "We gave them the game. They didn't earn what they got." They did. Texas is good. Tip your cap. All right, another disappointed of the weekend. How about Lane Kiffin? The Ole Miss Grove Collective went out of their way this offseason to raise money for NIL support money to help add to the Rebels roster to make it a championship contending roster. They had a goal of raising $10 million in their march to victory. And they added some stud players, man. They got Chris Paul, Walter Nolan, Trey Amos, Princely Monmielen. Yet they've been unable to take this team to the next level. As Lane Kiffin's team took their second loss of the season on Saturday, they lost at LSU 29-26 in overtime. This came just 2 weeks after losing at home 20-17 versus Kentucky. Ole Miss was favored in both of those games. And the Rebels offense that scored 76 against Furman, 52 against Middle Tennessee, 52 against Georgia Southern, they have yet to score 30 in an SEC game this season. Lane Kiffin saying after the game, his message to the team, he said, was, "This sucks, guys. I feel for you. I don't really have a lot of positives for you. It's easier if you get beat by a couple of touchdowns. This was like our game. We had the game. We let it slip away. To go into the bye week, 6-1 or whatever it is, in really good shape, get healthy, would have been great. This one will be hard. It will be around forever." Now, one other part here I did want to throw in on Lane Kiffin. If you guys missed it on Friday, Ole Miss issued a statement addressing the fact that its program had been highlighted in national discussions about faking injuries. Ole Miss said it would provide relevant medical information to national officiating coordinator Steve Shaw, that its coaching staff would speak to their players to ensure we conduct ourselves properly. Well, the Tiger Stadium crowd booed repeatedly when Ole Miss players went down with injuries, receiving treatment from trainers. In one instance, defensive end Jared Ivey went down after LSU had marched quickly from their own 25 to the Ole Miss 18. Ivey was back on the field where LSU failed on third down and settled for a field goal. But that's going to be one that doesn't go away. It's become a talking point amongst other teams and games across the country, but Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin's teams seem to be the biggest violators of it. And I don't know how you fix it. I don't know how a ref can determine if a guy is really injured or not, but certainly the blatant camera shots of quarterback turn, telling the guy, "Go down." They'll have to address that somehow, some way moving forward next season. And just to put a cap on this Lane Kiffin conversation, some have asked, what is his best road win since taking over at Ole Miss? I'd have to argue it is at Tulane last season. Lane Kiffin never played a ranked team on the road in 2020. He went 0-2 against ranked teams on the road in 2021. He never played a ranked team on the road in 2022. He lost at Bama and Georgia last year, and then just lost at LSU this past weekend. The only ranked team Lane Kiffin has beaten on the road since he's been in Oxford was at Tulane last year. He's never beaten a ranked SEC team on the road. Now, there is still some thought that Ole Miss could run the table and get into a playoff spot still, but they now have no room for error. The Rebels get a bye this week, then they will look to get back on track as they host Oklahoma on October 26th. Another depress of the weekend. How about Mark Stoops at Kentucky? The roller coaster season for Mark Stoops and Kentucky fans continued Saturday as the Wildcats lost a home game versus Vanderbilt for the second time in 3 seasons. The Cats lost to Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt 20-13. They dropped to 3-3 on the season, now just 1-3 in SEC play, with other losses to South Carolina and Georgia. And Kentucky still got to go play road games at Florida, at Tennessee, and number 1 Texas. They'll also host Auburn and Louisville. Mark Stoops is now 36-58 in SEC play in his 12 seasons in Lexington, just 6-13 now over his last 3 seasons. Keep in mind, Mark Stoops is among the 10 highest paid coaches in college football. He makes $9 million a season. And nothing against Vandy, but if you're paying Mark Stoops $9 million a year, you should never drop 2 of 3 to Vanderbilt. The Cats did outgain Vandy 324-290 in the yards department, but the Cats had 2 turnovers, were just 1 of 3 on 4th downs. And I don't know how Mark Stoops fixes this, but they are paying him a lot of money at Kentucky to win more games than he's been winning lately. All right, another disappointed, depressed of the weekend. How about Kalen DeBoer over at Alabama? Bama needed to hang on for dear life on Saturday to put away South Carolina 27-25 as the Tide were fresh off that road loss at Vanderbilt. Now, Bama was a 21-point home favorite against the Gamecocks. They won by 2. And that Alabama defense, they have given up 92 points over their last 10 quarters of play. Remember, they gave up 27 in the second half against Georgia. They gave up 40 a week ago against Vandy and 25 to the Gamecocks this past week. That's the same Gamecocks offense that Ole Miss held to just 3 points a week prior. But really what got a lot of Bama fans up in arms, not just from having to hang on for dear life to beat Carolina, but was seeing Kalen DeBoer smiling after the win in his post-game interview. As one tweeter pointed out, a picture of Kalen DeBoer smiling after his 2-point win against South Carolina in Tuscaloosa. It's a split screen with Nick Saban up 28 points in the national championship against Notre Dame, just absolutely letting a referee have it. Just yelling and scowling and unhappy. Quite a difference. This is the difference between Nick Saban and Kalen DeBoer. They are 2 very different coaches. Not saying Bama can't be successful under Kalen DeBoer, but it's certainly taking some adjusting for Bama fans to get used to. Ultimately, what matters most is Alabama's 5-1. Their title hopes and playoff hopes still alive, but the Tide came dangerously close to their second loss of the season, and they still have road trips at Tennessee, at LSU, at Oklahoma, and home games against Mizzou and Auburn. So more pitfalls remain on the schedule, but Kalen DeBoer's room for error is not very big. Paul Feinbaum saying Sunday, after watching that game, he said, nothing changed. That team was worse. And this team is on the brink. Kalen DeBoer's smile is finally wearing thin with the Tide faithful. They don't see the coach they thought they saw 2 weeks ago in the win over Georgia. Feinbaum even went on to say, they see someone who comes off weak, who comes off as a player's slap you on the back type of coach that doesn't really appeal to what Alabama football is built on. I think Kalen DeBoer's season is on the brink this weekend, and this doesn't look like a playoff team. Now, one more note on Alabama. According to Cole Kublik, he tweeted out the Crimson Tide actually have the best record in the FBS over the last 15 years when trailing going into the fourth quarter. Unfortunately, a lot of those were under Nick Saban, where he was able to pull off the comebacks. We'll see how many Kalen DeBoer has ahead of him. Another depress of the weekend. I'm putting Georgia's defense in here. Georgia did pick up the 41-31 win over the weekend, hosting Mississippi State to improve to 5-1 on the year. But the fact the Bulldogs gave up nearly 400 yards of offense and 31 points to lowly Mississippi State is a bit concerning. Where's that dominant Georgia defense, that suffocating defense that would lead the SEC or lead the country in points allowed per game? The Bulldogs, they're actually 7th in the SEC in points allowed per game right now. It's 17.2. The Bulldogs did not sack Michael Van Buren once on Saturday, and Georgia is actually second to last in the SEC in sacks this year with just 11. One tweeter sent out on Saturday, I haven't seen a Georgia team play this undisciplined and sloppy in the Kirby Smart era. And look, there was a video of Kirby Smart bumping into Michael Van Buren on the sideline, but he was actually yelling at Glenn Schumann. If you watch it, he was yelling at his DC going, what are we doing? But what happened to that scary Georgia defense? They might want to show up this weekend in Austin as Georgia has its next toughest test of the season, taking on the number one team in the country in Texas. And our last depressed of the weekend, I've got Billy Napier in overtime. The Florida Gators put up a heck of an effort on Saturday night in Knoxville. They led the Vols 3-0 at halftime, shutting out Josh Heupel's team in the first half. They'd go on to lose quarterback Graham Mertz to a foot injury. They would lean on the true freshman DJ Lagway, who, trailing by 7, would ultimately throw a touchdown pass with 29 seconds left in the game and a chance for Billy Napier to go for 2 and the win. He opted to kick the extra point, go to overtime on the road. Ultimately, Florida would not move the ball in overtime. They would miss a 47-yard field goal, and the Vols would punch it in for the victory. But many are pointing fingers at Billy Napier saying, Billy, you were 3-2, 1-1 in SEC play. This was your chance as a 15.5-point road underdog to steal one, and you blew it. Peter Burns tweeted out, still cannot believe Florida had an opportunity to go for 2 in the win at Tennessee and didn't do it. Mind-blowing, absolutely shocking. Scared money don't make money. Of course, that Napier quote from his time at Louisiana. Napier said after the game, well, we had the play we felt good about, and then obviously they burned a timeout. I think we felt from the 3 there, we were playing pretty good on both sides of our team, and at that point, we felt like, let's go to overtime. Let's go give our guys a chance to play some more plays. I thought defensively we kept ourselves in it. Wasn't quite ready to do that at that point in time. And now the Gators, a slight favorite at home versus what appears to be a beatable Kentucky team. The Gators have lost 3 straight to Kentucky, 4 of the last 6 after having beat them for 31 straight years. All right, still more to come here on the Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your teams every day. I want to remind you guys about our friends over at Game Time. The Game Time app has a new feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. The Game Time Picks filter will take out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And of course, Game Time Picks with their curation makes it easier for you to save money on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever it is you're looking for. They got it on the Game Time app. And of course, the all-in pricing feature. I like that one. You toggle that one, shows your total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Your seat views, you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know what to expect before you even get to the venue. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Go download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That'll get you $20 off your first purchase. If you've never used them before, terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem our code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. Get $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It is game time. All right, one more segment here on Locked On SEC, part of Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. As we start to roll on here, we got just a couple more nuggets to get into. How about over at Tennessee? SEC Nation announcing on Saturday they're heading to Knoxville for the Week 8 rivalry matchup between Tennessee and Alabama. Third Saturday in October. Of course, one of the biggest rivalries. The Crimson Tide owned the Vols for 15 straight years before Tennessee finally broke that streak in 2022. Alabama won last year's contest. Tennessee looking to win a second straight at home against Alabama. That Alabama defense has not been strong, but the Tennessee offense has not looked great these last couple weeks. Jalen Milroe's been playing well for Alabama, so we will see what this game holds. But some big matchups coming this weekend across college football. Of course, we got Georgia and Texas. We got LSU and Arkansas. But Tennessee and Alabama set to kick off 3:30 Eastern from Neyland Stadium on ABC on Saturday. And a quick update looking at the polls, the AP poll, some changes this week in how things shook out, but Texas still holding strong as the number one team. The Horns received 56 of 62 first place votes, 4 more than last week, and their most since they were a unanimous number one in October of 2008. But their 31-point win over Oklahoma, very convincing, and everybody sticking with them at number one. Of course, Oregon got a big win over Ohio State, winning 32-31, but they didn't move Ohio State very far. So Oregon comes in at 2. Penn State comes in at number 3. They had an overtime win at USC. This is Penn State's highest ranking in 7 years. But your top 5, it's Texas 1, Oregon 2, Penn State 3, Ohio State 4, Georgia 5. Georgia still sitting there as a top 5 team. Alabama comes in at number 7, despite their close win over South Carolina. LSU moves up to number 8. LSU into the top 10 as one of the highest ranked one-loss teams, along in there with Georgia. Georgia losing to Alabama. LSU lost to USC in week 1. Rounding out the rest of the SEC, Tennessee comes in at number 11 in the AP poll. Texas A&M comes in at number 14. Ole Miss with the loss at LSU slides down to 18, and Mizzou comes in at number 19. Now, I did see in the others receiving votes category, they did have Vanderbilt right there at the top of that list. So Vandy basically like the number 26 if we were doing full rankings past 25. But as far as conferences go, SEC with 8 teams ranked at the top 25, the Big Ten with 6. So shout out to the SEC teams ranked. And of course, all these rankings are going to get flipped around again because in the coming weeks, we're going to have LSU's going to play A&M. Georgia's playing Texas this weekend. Alabama's playing Tennessee. So some of these teams are going to move up and move down over the course of the next couple weeks. All right. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. For your second listen, you can check out some of our other great podcasts on the network. Our buddy Chris Marler doing a Locked On Gamecocks. Of course, Luke Robinson doing Locked On Bama. Daniel and Clint do a great job with Locked On Georgia with the Georgia Bulldogs. So check those out wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Chris Gordy. It's been Locked On SEC. Brought you all our Week 7 winners and losers of the SEC. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast either on Apple iTunes or Spotify. And then, of course, hit subscribe, the little bell-looking button on YouTube. Make sure you guys do that for us and get subscribed. You'll get notification every time new episodes are uploaded each and every day right here on your home for Talking SEC. Oh, it is Locked On SEC. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.